Amazing. We're live now. So, um, unfortunately, everyone missed our little intro. But, yeah, but, I know it's fine. So, today our topic of discussion is managing expectations. We just want to take a quick second to go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves, talk a little bit about themselves, and then we'll just get started. So, why don't we go in alphabetical order? I guess that would be Anne first.
Okay, I'm Ann Crow, and I have Parkinson's disease. I was diagnosed in 2017, and um, I have shifted a little bit in terms of how my life has unfolded. I have things like daytime sleepiness, which I didn't used to have, and things like that. So it's been a little bit of an adventure, but a good one at the same time.
Fish, why don't you go next?
Hi, I'm Mr. Fish of Mr. Fish Comics. I am the fastest working man in indie comics. I am also lucky enough to be one of thousands of people in the world with Tourette syndrome and ADHD and autism spectrum disorder, but the Tourette's tends to show up a whole lot more and be a whole lot more obvious. And it's given me some challenges in my life, and I spent a long time stuck in a wheelchair and couldn't walk, talk, or see a lot of the time. But it also makes my brain run incredibly fast and makes me incredibly creative. And I've knocked out like 40 indie comic books over the last 4 years. And I just wrote and penciled, lettered an entire comic book in 7 days. So, it's not so bad.
Um, who's next now? Jason. Jason, you
Hi,
want to go next?
sure. So I'm Jason Harris. I'm an autistic person with other co-occurring disabilities. I have a master's in disability studies, which is looking at the cultural context around disabilities. And, this is something that has been a personal as well as an interest, about what is it to balance sort of expectations and sort of things and making sure you're putting your best foot forward, but also being realistic, being understanding of what is tough because we all have to sort of navigate those sort of things. And I think it's more complex as a disabled person because you're sort of used to being told what you're not good at, or to not really given sort of the scaffolding around some of these things. So this is an important discussion that I was excited to be a part of.
Um, hey, Lynn, why don't you go next?
Hi, everybody. I'm Lynn Hewitt, and I live in Indiana. I have Parkinson's. I was diagnosed in 2015 at the age of 52. And I have found that you will have many unique challenges with this disease. But if you work at the things that you can do well and not focus on the things that you cannot do, sometimes you can amaze yourself and do some incredible things. And there are therapies and programs out there to help with someone with a disability, and you can actually have a high quality of life even with this particular disease.
And Richard, you want to go next?
Yes, so I'm Richard Underwood, and I live in Basingstoke, the United Kingdom. And I'm also known on the circuit as the Rickety Warrior, and I help run a couple of online support groups and involved in many things sort of go on around the world. Um, and I'm just about to go out to the Canary Islands to a Parkinson's rehab centre for my punishment for having Parkinson's, but it would be great fun. So I'm going surfing, which I've never done, which would be fun. I had Parkinson's when I was 38, and I lost my sense of smell at 38. And I just thought it was because I was getting old. Well, silly me, over the next 20 years, I got diagnosed 4 years ago. I have the privilege of falling asleep at a big clients meeting around an executive table and striking a big deal. and my boss kicking me under the table, saying, "What's wrong with you?" But I enjoy everything I do within Parkinson's. Frustrating, but I've met so many marvelous people, and that's my little story. And I'm 58 now.
And so
First off, we're really thankful that you guys are all here to help us explain and contribute. We all have different experiences with our disabilities and different abilities. So we can all share our experiences in different ways for the disability community as a whole. So thank you. I can get into, so I'm Crystal, obviously, and I have ataxia. And I've had some complications.
and I'm Mark. Also have ataxia. I have a genetic form. Crystal has an acquired form. And as far as the discussion today, we're hoping to talk about managing expectations and dig deep into that and talk about how that's relevant for people with disabilities and perhaps give people some insight into how they can navigate their own journey through disability through some of the stories we might or experiences we might have to share. So let's start with the first question. Let's go around the room and find out why why do you think managing expectations is important? Who wants to tackle this one first?
I think
No
it's
one?
important to be managing one's own expectations for oneself as well as others' expectations for oneself. I'm somebody who has always had a concern about letting people down, and almost by definition, I'm now letting people down all the time because I have Parkinson's fatigue that affects me. And if I ignore things like that and decide I'm just going to go ahead and do what I would have done in the old days, I'm going to drive out and run all these errands and help out this person, I might fall asleep behind the wheel. That happened one time. And so being honest with myself about my limitations is in the long run necessary. It's humbling, but it's necessary, and it's actually less bother for everybody else than if I just try and carry on as if I didn't have Parkinson's.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to then add to that. I think also your expectations. What you have to realise is that everything takes double, triple the effort. So for me, just to come on here, I've had to set an alarm so I don't fall asleep and miss the event. I then have to be able to walk to my seat, and that can be a bit of a struggle. Um, and just everything is double the effort. So it being double the effort is double the fatigue, double the condition affecting you. And I've always looked at it from the point of view, might sound a bit strange, but when I had my twin girls, the midwife said to me, "You won't always get there on time because you've got two babies now." And I look at it and think, well, I'm the baby now. So I always say to people, I may not get there, or I may not get there at all, or I could be late. And if you're lucky, I might be on time. Um, but I think managing the expectations is to be honest with yourself and accept, which is often difficult, that you've got a condition, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. I have found it very interesting and difficult over my life because, like, I wasn't diagnosed with Tourette's until I was older, and ADHD and everything else that keeps me running so fast all the time made me a great hard worker. It made me somebody who could get stuff done really quick. I was always the guy you would call for help. I was always there to help out at work or at church or wherever. And then when it got so severe that I'm on crutches and I'm in a wheelchair, having to accept the fact that I can't always be there, I can't always do all this stuff, I can't give 150% like I was used to, and now I can only give 10 if I'm lucky sometimes. That was a really hard thing to come to terms with, and managing my own expectations and how much I can do, how much I can handle before I get too tired, and then I wipe myself out for 3 days to recover. Learning to manage other people's expectations of what they could expect of me now. And then after a long time of that, with treatments and medications and learning to take care of myself better and learning to surf the waves of the Tourette's rather than trying to fight it, things have gotten a lot better. And now I've had to get accustomed to the fact that, oh no, I can do more. I can do more than I used to be able to do. And like, I was so concerned in the beginning when I started rebuilding my freelance career about managing my clients' expectations, because I was so afraid of, what's going to happen if I have a bad day and, I'm down for 3 days and I can't work and they're expecting pages to come in. And so I was real worried about making sure that they knew, I've got this condition. Sometimes I have bad days, things happen. Sometimes I'm at doctors all day. What turned out to be the bigger case is I have to manage their expectations about how quickly I work, because they're not used to that. And that has been a bigger issue than the occasional time I have to take a day off, because they're used to people that get 2 or 3 pages a week out, and I'm knocking out like 5 or 6 pages a day. And they're just not expecting this onslaught to come, so they don't check their messages and don't get back to me as quickly. And it's been interesting, but I've had to learn, and I have to keep adjusting as I go because the expectations keep changing.
Interestingly, I have found myself much more supportive of other people as a result of having to accept my own brokenness, if you want to put it that way. Part of it is that I joined a Rocksteady boxing class, and so I could look around 3 times a week and see the faces of these extraordinary people who fight hard against Parkinson's and have spunk and a sense of humor and a sense of perspective and a sense of thankfulness that I truly admire. And so, I could see how valiant they were, even if it took me a while to see value in myself as someone who was not as free to accomplish things as I used to be. But what I've discovered is that, at 65, I look around at my peers and heck, everybody's dealing with something. I mean, even people who don't have chronic disease or anything exciting, they have things going on in their lives that take huge amounts of courage and faith and perspective and all of that to deal with. And I can cheer them on because I can see that it's not easy for them either.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel actually much more connected with other people than I was once upon a time when I felt like I could do anything if I just cared enough and tried hard enough, which wasn't true even then. Ask my calculus teacher.
One thing I've had to learn to manage about managing my own expectations is being really honest with myself about how much I can do, but also being honest with myself about how much I've accomplished. Because, when I think about the old fish that could knock out 150 times what I can do now, and I hold myself up to that old dude, I can't compete with that kid anymore. I can't do that much, and it makes me feel bad. Like I've had to have my father-in-law help me with, carpentry projects around the house when I expected to be building my house at this stage. And now, I'm lucky to open the door. But I have to be honest about all the things that I did accomplish and the boxes that I did help move and the things that I did put away and all the things that I've accomplished today, even if I didn't get my whole list knocked out. Be real honest about the things that I did accomplish and not shortchange them because it's not as much as I hope the imaginary fish would have been able to do.
I found that it's also important to look at the converse side of that, because some people will shortchange themselves and blame their disease for not being able to do certain things, and they're doing themselves a disservice. So it's important to as well as recognize your accomplishments and what you can do. Do not let the disease be an excuse for not doing things that you can do. Always set goals for yourself and stretch goals for yourself to reach for. And sometimes you will amaze yourself with what you can do.
Mhm.
Now, of course, there's going to be certain things that we cannot accomplish, but we also need to make sure not to use the disease as an unnecessary crutch to keep us from living a quality life and doing the things that we can. So that's a part of your managing your expectations too, is don't sell yourself short.
And I was going to say what I think is very important is not hiding away at home, but getting out and
Mhm.
meeting people. Because I think the socialization is so vital in creating positivity going forward for people. That's what I find.
Absolutely.
Yes, I live very close to the world headquarters for Rocksteady Boxing, which is a big program for Parkinson's disease.
Mhm.
And so in real life, I know hundreds and hundreds of people with Parkinson's disease, and many of them have become genuine family. And yes, that is so important. When you know people that are like you and have similar struggles that you do, you can inspire each other. And that socialization is an essential part of dealing with whatever challenges we each have.
And just so many little things that you can pick up and tips and tricks. And hey, this worked for me. Maybe it'll help you out. Like I was just chatting with a friend and they talked about how they take, Sudoku puzzles and, games on their phone to the doctor's office so they're not yelling stuff out in the waiting room because it occupies their mind. I started trying that and it was amazing, man. I can wait in line just about anywhere now without screaming yellow rubber tugboat at the top of my lungs because it's occupying my mind. And it's one of the things we talked about when we did that interview earlier. Like working on comics helps occupy my mind. It keeps all those things firing. So I can sit there in my recliner and draw all day. And once I stop, the tics come back and they come back really bad. And, maybe it's hard to get up and walk around. And maybe I realize I'm not going to be a lot of help around the house right now. So I decide I'm going to go back to work. I can do this and hyper focus until it's bedtime and, at least make money so we can pay the rent. And, then I'll have a dance off. And we'll go to bed.
I would say too. I mean, that's a part of managing expectations. Is going with the ideas of spoon theory. There's some things that take up spoons, and there's other things that are. So I mean, for me, like, oh, maybe I want to be able to cook, but how much energy is that going to take, and how much is that going to take? So I can't do anything else. So what is the manageable thing to do where I'm not completely reliant, but I'm also not spending all my time and resources on something that takes longer or takes a lot more energy, and being able to do that well enough to where I'm not like straining, but also being able to put my mind and my faculties in the things that I would rather be doing or better at doing, rather than just, sometimes service model approaches for trying to make somebody like really good at it or something that maybe what we consider they're not proficient at. And it's like, well, how much do you actually need to do that just to survive versus like, do I really need to be an expert at cooking, or can I just be good enough?
Mm-hmm. And that's a really good point. Like I would love to be able to cook my own breakfast every day and cook dinner for my family every night and get work done and go do the grocery shopping. I physically cannot do all of those. So, I've got to pick and choose each day. How much can I handle, and I'm testing those spoons out every day. I'm like, how many do I have today? How much can I accomplish? And if it's a good day, then I'm going to get as much done as I can today. If it doesn't feel so great, I'm going to have a bowl of cereal instead of, cooking an omelet for breakfast. Or I like managing expectations. I like to cook when I cook something. I like to cook something that's easy, doesn't take a whole lot of effort. I don't have to stand in the kitchen for 2 hours. And crock pot or whatever, and we'll have meals today and tomorrow, and I got lunch the day after. Like, I like to plan for that. Make a big pot roast that I can turn into soup the next day in 5 minutes, and feed my family twice off of 2 hours worth of work. And then I can go back to my chair and go back to drawing comic books the rest of the day.
Those are some very good points. Crystal, do you want to add?
I think Lynn was talking about, there are definitely people with disabilities sometimes that will use their disability to say, I can't do this, I can't do that. But in the same respect, there's also people who think, oh, she can't do this or he can't do that. Let us tell you we can, instead of you expecting that we can't or can do something.
And that's actually an excellent lead into our next question. And I want to hear what everyone thinks about this. How are managing expectations for yourself as an individual and managing expectations of how the world treats you related?
Like you were just saying, other people's expectations of me drives me up the wall. When they're like, "Oh, poor Fish, bless his heart. We can't ask him to the movies because it'd be too much for him. Oh, bless, we can't take Fish out to dinner. He's in so much pain." I'm gonna be in pain either way. I might as well go hang out with my friends and be in pain. I'm gonna be sitting there yipping and yelping in my chair anyway. I might as well be yipping and yelping in a restaurant with my friends, having fun. I let me decide if it's too much for me. Let me decide if I can go or not, because.
And sorry to interject. And in some cases, not being invited out by your friends may cause you more pain, right?
Oh man, that stinks. All the guys at church went out one night on a guy's night, didn't even think to invite poor old crippled Fish. And one of the guys is on the police department. His wife's on the SWAT team, so she brought some machine guns out, and they're out in the woods, and they all got to shoot machine guns. Oh, Fish didn't get to do that. How many times do you get that opportunity? Like, I'm not even a gun dude, but you get the opportunity to shoot a machine gun with the freaking leader of the SWAT team? Yes, please. I would like to do that. I don't care if I hit nothing. That would have been fun to do. It's a once-in-a-lifetime shot. No, bless his heart. Poor Fish wouldn't want it. I did want to come. I did.
Now you're going to have 50 friends all inviting you to come and shoot machine guns with them.
Hey, you want to go outside and shoot some guns? Let's go.
There we go. One of the confusing things for me about Parkinson's is that it's so unpredictable. And so I can never rest in feeling like I can or cannot do something, because it can vary from not just day to day, but even hour to hour. And the blessing in that is that I have found myself trying to do things that in the old days I would have been too chicken to try. Like I do rock steady boxing, and I'm now one of the coaches for our group, which is absurd because I am not at all an athletic person. But, Parkinson's takes you places you didn't intend to go, and some of them were pretty cool. But, sometimes my balance is really, really off, but I still try to do the balance exercises, for example, with the class. And other days, my body's being really cooperative, and that's a little bit astonishing too. So one of the blessings, I think, is that I am learning to listen to my body when it tries to whisper to me how it's doing and what it needs. And I'm the kind of person who could have happily gone the rest of my life ignoring my body and its attempts to say things like, you need to exercise more, or it would really help you feel better if you stretched. now I'm actually paying attention to those kinds of signals. So that's pretty awesome. And I'm also finding that I'm not above the little bitty celebrations of life. Like I come in and I announce to my class things like, there are no rotting vegetables in my refrigerator right now. And everybody bursts out in cheers because they know that that's a big deal for me.
Mhm.
So we're learning to celebrate even the small things.
It's
I think that
frustrating for not knowing, because like there's times that I'm like, oh, I don't feel so good, but I'll get up and try it anyway. And it turns out once I get moving, everything feels better. And I go all day and it's great. And I just powered through and it was wonderful. And then there's other days I'm like, you know what? I'm going to power through. And I nosedive into the ground, literally sometimes. And I'm like, oh, nope, I shouldn't have done that. I should have listened. But it's the not knowing that's frustrating. Is this a
Well,
day?
yes. Sorry, go on.
No,
I was just going to add and say, I think managing sort of other people's expectations, I always think is about being honest with them. So I'm never embarrassed about having Parkinson's, and I often tell them that I flick through food round restaurants, I have a runny nose, and I sweat all over, and I stagger to a seat, and if somebody gets me peas on my plate at a mealtime, I spend an hour trying to get them on the plate. So in the end, I end up using my fingers. But I always tell them that I've got Parkinson's, and I always tell, even the restaurant staff, because they say, well, how, and they all know me now. So when I go down to the local restaurant, they'll go, how are you today, Richard? And some days I stagger in as though I'm completely drunk, completely on something high, and other days I can walk in. But I always think being honest, which a lot of people like to hide the symptoms. They don't. I've had people come to me that haven't even told their wife that they've got Parkinson's, which is, I think terrible. And but I'm always honest. I always sort of put it out as it is, and I often sit on things like this today. And I have a tissue here just in case my nose runs. I've got a tissue on the other side just in case my eyes run. So I'm always well prepared. But I think it's communication, which is the massive thing, and being honest with yourself that you just can't do everything. You know, the other week I had my hair cut and I got stuck trying to get out of the chair. And it's lucky the hairdresser I know her very well because I nearly ended up in an uncompromising position, stuck. And she was going to me, "Don't worry, Richard, I won't let you fall." And I'm thinking, I'm not worried, but I can't move. So you have to, and have the fun with it, and and sort of the anxiety that you get with it as well. Because I always have an anxiety of falling, and that's because I had a bad fall once. And when my legs start to wobble, the first thing I say to my wife is, I'm going to go. I'm going to go like a big tree. And I always get told, no, you're not. But I think it's about living with the condition, having a good sense of humour and realising that you just can't do it all the time.
I
Humor
agree
is
with
huge.
Richard.
Yeah.
I agree with Richard wholeheartedly that you have to communicate with people, and especially people that are going to be around you on a regular basis, is educate them about your condition, and also communicate with them regularly about how you are feeling on a particular day and what's a struggle for you and what's easy for you, because that saves them a lot of frustration as well, so that they understand what you are dealing with on that particular day. If you try to keep it a secret to yourself, then they can get frustrated at you for thinking you're not doing your share or not pitching in the way you should. Where if you are just honest with them and open with them and help them to understand your condition, because it's not something that shows. It's not like you have a wart growing out the side of your head or something. Some of these things there's no visible sign, and so you have to share what's going on inside yourself so that they can help you along with it, and you can continue about your day with less stress and less anxiety about what you happen to be facing on a given day. Because every day is different, and every adventure is going to be different and new symptoms and new side effects will pop up, and you've got to just be able to deal with them and move on, and having the support of those around you by sharing with them what you're dealing with is very important to do that.
I
Depends
try
on
and
the
share with
person,
new
though.
people that, like, if we're going to be in a social situation, I may not get up a lot. And like, if we're at church, my wife might go get my plate at the potluck or the birthday party or whatever. And I'm not being lazy. It's not that I think that's woman's work. It's nothing like that. It's if I go up and try and get a plate of cheese dip and make it back, we're all going to be wearing it by the time I get back to my chair. And I have to think about how much I exert myself because, like, I've got to make it through this party. I've got to make it through the parking lot. I've got to get down the curb. I've got to get my legs into the car. I've got to hopefully be able to drive home, or at least be able to get in the passenger seat if my wife's with me. Am I going to be able to get into bed tonight? I'm trying to think all that stuff out. So I'm trying to be careful about how much I exert myself sometimes now. Not being lazy, but if I don't let people know that, sometimes I get looks.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true. We have these systems or ways of thinking that say this is the way you adult. This is the way, like, you hit these milestones, you do these things. And I think that affects everybody to some extent, with and without disabilities. We have a grinding culture where you do everything and you don't have disparate sort of things, and people are sort of exhausted. And I mean, I think that goes into other societal things. I think it goes to people with disabled people, especially because people with disabled people have to prove that they're able to do it even higher than non-disabled people. So the idea of the super grip and being able to, and I mean, there's times where people, you tell them what's going on with you and they just dismiss it. I don't know how many times I've told somebody, this is what I need, or this is what's going on with me. You're not trying hard enough. You just need to do this. You just, so I mean, I agree with being open to people if they're people who are willing to be open with you as well and see you are. But I mean, I think there's a lot of times where, I mean, I think that's why there's sometimes trouble with ADA compliance with workplaces and people not willing to identify as disabled in workplaces, because employers or even other people don't always accept it, and they have preconceived notions of what disability is or what somebody should be doing, or that it's always 100% the same all the time. And so, I mean, I think there's a lot of expectations just in our society overall for people, and then there's an extra burden for people with disabilities or disabled people to be able to sort of match those things, and being able to say, like, look, my brain is works this way. I need downtime. I can't go all the time. Otherwise, I start to get, like, my brain starts to feel like it's going to explode. And I do the best work this way. But I mean, I think there's not always that acceptance, or, well, if we do this for you, then we're going to have to do it for everybody, which is like, well, universal design isn't a bad thing. I mean, if people, as long as, I mean, I know there's always going to be people who abuse the system, but the majority of people are going to do what is best, as long as, and especially if you have the culture right, whether it's a workplace or anywhere outside of that. So I don't know. Sorry, I know I went on a little bit of a diatribe.
Oh no, but you're absolutely
good
right.
stuff.
So many. I tried so many places to get a job in graphics before I finally decided to just go back into freelance work, because it'd be a whole lot easier to work for somebody else than to have to be my own marketing department and billing and all that stuff. And nobody was willing to take a shot on me because I was disabled, and no, there's just going to be too much attached to that. I guarantee you, if they see the amount of work I've accomplished over the last few years, they're kicking themselves if they didn't hire me now. But, the thought of, I may need to turn the lights down in my office. I might listen to music to distract part of my brain. No, that's too much. If you do that, everybody's going to have to do. Is it really that bad a thing if people get to listen to some music in their private office? Like, I don't see that being an issue, but okay, I'll go to work for myself. And turns out people love my work.
Well, that's great. There are so many confusing things that we have to take into account. One of the things that that I think is confusing about Parkinson's is that, masking is rather common. And so a person can lose their ability to express their true emotions through their facial expressions. And so they look as if they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
and they can care passionately, and they can even say that, but their face does not bear that out. And so people can end up with the wrong impression of how committed they are, or how passionately they do care. And I find that very sad. So I look for every possible opportunity to educate people about Parkinson's and about some of the other disabilities that I've come to know through people who have been in my life and who I love very much.
Mhm.
And I never know who has someone in their life who perhaps has Parkinson's, just got diagnosed, or who has autism, or who has cerebral palsy. You know, there are all sorts of things that I've found myself connected with because of people I love. And so when I'm at the checkout and I'm having trouble punching numbers into the little machine to pay for my purchases, I'll just laugh and I'll say, "Well, Parkinson's fingers are winning this battle." And more often than not, somebody in the vicinity will say, "You have Parkinson's?" And that'll open a conversation, and they know someone who has Parkinson's, and suddenly they are going to be a more supportive family member or friend to that individual, and that's a good thing. So I actually carry little business cards around with me with my name and contact information, and also information about how to find out where there is a nearby Rocksteady boxing class, because I've had more people involved in conversations with me which end with, "Well, you know, how do I tell my uncle about Rocksteady?" That kind of thing. And I say, "Here, this will get you started." So, you know, educate the heck out of other people, because, you know, if they don't end up dealing with Parkinson's, they'll end up dealing with something. If you live long enough, you always end up dealing with
It takes
something.
a few minutes, and it can really make a big deal. I used to never go outside without wearing a shirt that cracked some kind of joke about my Tourette syndrome, because it brought the tension down. Because when I'm walking around in public and I'm twitching and I'm jerking, like, people get nervous and they don't know, am I okay? Do they need to call an ambulance? Am I on drugs? And when I yell out something ridiculous and I'm like, sorry, it's Tourette's, and I just smile and wave, or I'm wearing a t-shirt that cracks a joke about Tourette's, they realize, oh, okay, that's what it is. He's okay. I don't need to worry. I'm safe. He's safe. I don't need to call an ambulance. My kids are okay. And then they realize that I have a sense of humor. I'm cool about it. And many people will come up and ask me questions about it. And, well, my uncle has Tourette's. And then a conversation gets started. And it's just such an easy icebreaker. And I will sit there and stop for 20 minutes in Walmart if you want to talk about it. And I will give you all the education I can, because you never know when you're going to come across somebody later on that you could be a big difference in their life when they're having a rough day.
But I was going to add something else which I've found since I've been diagnosed, and when I'm out and about, and like up in places in London, is that people, and I found people without the condition, or any condition, or don't seem to have a condition, are extremely helpful and extremely nice. The people where I've gone to events and tried to encourage people to take part in activities with Parkinson's, where they have Parkinson's, a lot of them can be quite offended by me saying, "Why don't you come along to the support group? Why don't you come along to the boxing class? Or why don't you come?" And their reactions are quite amaze me, because I get some negativity from Parkinson's people, where the general public are extremely nice. I had a guy, I was trying to get onto a train, and he walked right across this big station up in London, and he said to me, "You've heard of Tom Cruise? Well, I'm your wingman, and I'm going to take you through the crowd. And anyone who approaches you, I'm going to knock them to one side, and we'll protect you." And I had him and his friends, we were like a squadron of jet fighters going across this platform. And I thought, what a good bit of sense of humour. And but people are so nice. Do you know what I mean? And I've always sort of been amazed how kind people are. You know, I've never
Yes.
had anybody who hasn't tried to help me, except for some people with Parkinson's,
I've had a
which is
couple of
interesting.
experiences, but more often than not, what I've realized, and a lot of people with Tourette's have the same reaction of everybody on the bus was staring at me. They hate me. They think I'm some kind of monster. And when I actually talk to these people, usually they're more concerned. They want to make sure I'm safe and they're safe. But once you dispel that fear, everybody's
Mm.
happy. Everybody's glad I'm there. Everybody's fine. It's just that concern of, do I need to call an ambulance? Is he having a stroke or is he okay? Like, you know, but that fear is easy to take as they're glaring at me. And, you know, and if we let that negative self-talk keep going and we don't do anything to dispel that or find out what the truth is, then yeah, we're going to think that's the truth. But like you said, more often than not, people have been so nice. And I've never had anybody like, you know, not be willing to hold the door for me in my wheelchair or grab something off of a top shelf or something like that. Now, granted, I'm fortunate and I try and stand up for our brothers and sisters with corporalia because while I have corporalia, which is a sub-condition that makes you yell out inappropriate things, my inappropriate is usually random nonsense that doesn't mean anything. Occasionally I swear, but not real often. But, you know, for some people, they swear like a sailor in public. And nobody has ever gotten mad at me for being in a wheelchair or being on crutches, but you are hardwired to get mad when somebody starts cussing you. And once they get mad, they're not listening to any excuses about Tourette syndrome and stuff. They are just mad. And we had a lady blow up at us at a restaurant after Tourette's camp, and we got all these kids in there. The management knows all our kids have Tourette's, and we're all there from Tourette's camp. And they're screaming and yelping, and one of them yells out a racial slur, and then they're all repeating it and screaming it. And this lady got really upset about it, and I don't blame her for being bothered by that. But when we tried to explain to her that these kids have Tourette's, she just keeps yelling, and it blows up into this fight, and we're trying to separate everybody. And the moms explained 50 times to this woman that our kids have Tourette's. It's a neurological condition. You can't do anything about it, you know. And finally, after the fight dies down and everything, we get them to their separate corners. And we're explaining to the lady, and she's like, oh, well, if you had just told me they had Tourette's, it wouldn't have been a problem. It was like, we told you 50 times, but you were mad. You weren't processing properly when you're angry. And that's a hard thing. So I'm always jumping to my brothers and sisters' defense because, you know, people get mad about that quickly and don't listen to it. And that's one thing I wish I could get out there, to be a little bit more compassionate in the neurotypical world when that happens.
Yeah, that's important. That's an important point to consider. Crystal, you wanted to add a question?
No, a question within a question. In the disability community, I've talked to so many people get so frustrated and exhausted trying to explain their disability and trying to, people have expectations of them and they get so tired of trying to explain their disability. And some people, they have their own connotation of what you are or what you can do and stuff like that. And sometimes you just have to say, okay, whatever, and just go on, because done it so many times trying to explain yourself that you can't anymore. So what do you do with that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things where people are like, oh, you must be like Sheldon Cooper, you must be like Rain Man, or you must be like this character I saw on TV or my nephew, or well, there's probably some similarities just because I'm a person and then there's some autism similarities. You can sort of be different. I think there's also sometimes that performative aspect that you always have to sort of be on, like, because people are going to use you as the experience that they have.
Come on, do the thing.
Yeah. or that you're going to be somebody's inspiration. I'm like, I just want to be at the doctor's office and just be able to sit there sometimes. I don't want
It's such an inspiration that you got the mail. I just check the mail. I do it every day. It's not an inspiration.
Yeah. I mean, that was like for me with learning to drive. People are like, it's amazing. It's like, yeah, when I learned to drive, I was really excited. Now it's just a means to an end. I have no aspirations to be a NASCAR driver or be amazing at it. As long as I'm not getting in wrecks, I'm okay with just being good. Sorry.
Hi, Cassidy. Do you or Gavin want to add anything to this point?
Can you repeat the question?
Our managing expectations stuff and managing expectations and how the world she related it.
I know for me, there's always two sides to a story. And I know it can be very, very frustrating to really internalize those aspects that most people just don't understand. And we need to remember that those people need grace. Those people need grace just as much as we do. And sometimes, yes, we are having a bad day. And yes, we need to retreat ourselves to be in like behind a closed door or something. Yes, I understand that. Because with a brain injury, you're going to have those hard days no matter what you believe. It's just all part of the package, but knowing when to seclude yourself behind closed doors is probably the best thing, because that really shows us that we have maturity and kind of we know when to really bring ourselves away from the crowd. But sometimes it can come on suddenly, and I do not discount those times that when we don't know when it's happening, because most of the time it's out of the blue. But really deciphering which way to turn the coin in the times that we engage ourselves or disengage ourselves is probably the best thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. And meaning even who you like trust. I mean, I think that's true for anybody, but especially for people with disabilities. It's like, who can I open myself up to? Who will listen to me? And then I want to be able to listen to them. And that doesn't mean that like they always 100% get it, or I always 100% get them. But I know, when I was younger, it was hard to trust people because some of those things. And I think I'm at a point in my life where there's a few people, outside just my family and stuff who I feel like, okay, they sort of get it. And I feel like I can tell them and they'll work with me to figure some of this out, or
Yeah.
they're not going to dismiss me. So I agree. That's a really good point. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're totally spot on too.
Oh yeah, I've got friends that I love and that I can trust, and especially with Tourette's, being able to trust the people you're around is important, because if you're not around people you can trust, they're going to be trying to set off your tics, and they're going to like. I knew I loved my buddy Matt, who's one of my best friends, when he realized that if he said this, it's going to trigger this tick, and he's like, "Oh, I could have fun, but that's not fair. I'm not going to do that." And I was like, all right, you are my man. You're my buddy now because I know I can trust you in that. Because there's a lot of other people that'll be like, oh, hey, do that thing you did at church the other day. Do it. You remember? And, they'll try and set it off like it's some kind of party trick. And it might be funny to you and it might give a lot of laughs right now. But if we keep doing this could become a permanent tick to me forever that I will have for the rest of my life. That I will be yelling out in the bank and I'll be yelling out in the bathroom. And, like this isn't fun and games for me. Like it might have been funny. Okay for us to all laugh at it. It was funny. But it's not okay to try and trigger me into doing it over and over again. And that's where, like, I've had to really edit the people I keep around me because of stuff like this.
Well, it's not that it's because they're triggering, but honestly, I wouldn't see that as a friend with someone that would want to set those off. That's just like making fun of you almost.
That's one thing. Parents definitely, when you explain that is a situation, and we still do it. When they don't know, and you don't mitigate that that's an issue with you and that will set you off. Because I know Cassidy or even Mark and I can attest to that when certain things happen, our anxiety gets higher and our intensity gets worse and our nerves get worse, right? So, it's kind of like we try to explain this stuff and think people will respect you and not make those things happen. Other people don't care and will do it anyway.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I've come up with a whole story to explain it to people, and like if they don't get it after that, then we don't need to be around each other anymore. But I like with my Tourette's and my tics, I'll explain it like, okay, imagine we're at a party together and we're all having fun, and I've got a button in my pocket and I can push it and you pee your pants, and we all laugh and it's funny and you're not really hurt. And you go off in the house, you get yourself cleaned up, you come back out, I got you again, and we all laugh. That's rude. But if I do that enough times, that's going to continue to go off randomly for the rest of your life. And that's not cool. And if they can't realize after that, I'm just yelling out something stupid, but I might not want to yell it out for the rest of my life. And I've got a whole lot of tics that are permanent that will never go away. And so I try and be careful. Like, I say some really funny stuff sometimes, and I will post it and laugh about it, but I don't want that to become a regular thing because I got enough regular ones. I don't need to be adding to them.
I find that sometimes. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was trying to see if Gavin's around, if he can hear us, or.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we can hear you. Do you have anything to add to this question?
Yeah, I don't know if it relates specifically to the question, but even when we start to get comfortable with our expectations and managing our expectations to some degree, it may not jibe with our spouse or other people we live with. And that can be its own issue. Just recently, as an example, we had to have a lot of work done in our house because of underground plumbing leak. And it was causing my wife a lot of concern. Insurance is going to pay for it, but the unpleasantness of having some, contractors in your house redoing everything, and the noise and dust and moving and invasion of your home for a couple weeks it was unnerving, especially so to my wife because she works from home and is trying to work through all this noise and chaos. And she was worried about it, and we were talking about it, and she goes, "How are we going to get through if this takes a long time and X and X happen?" And I said, "Well, we'll get through it just the way we get through everything else." And what I thought was a good answer was a terrible answer. It's not the answer she wanted to hear. She wanted to know more specific. She wanted me to show some worry, to show concern, and show how hard it was going to be for her and the family. And, my way of getting through things is because we can't predict. I can't predict as well my outcomes, and I live much more day to day, and don't try to put a lot of control into things I can't control. That's my way of handling things, and her way of handling things is trying to get more control over uncertainties in life. And so, we had a nice go round about, my need to understand her concerns and give them credibility, and I guess her need to understand my way of just we'll handle things when they come along the way we always do, and confidence in doing that. And so even like, when you get comfortable managing your own expectations, it's not necessarily the same as other people in your home, and you have to reconcile that too.
I actually have been dealing with that a lot. It really frustrates me because me and my lovely new wife are heading in on our second anniversary now, and we have had to get used to, not only merging families, but having to learn what to expect from each other. Like, my kids grew up with me having Tourette's. And, like I joke, my kids' second language is grunt because they're fluent in understanding me when I can't speak through a clenched jaw. And they know right what I need when stuff goes bad. My stepkids kind of panic sometimes when it gets really scary because they haven't grown up with it, and it's unusual for them. My wife tends to fall sometimes on the side of trying to be too protective of me. And, well, I don't want to stress you out. I don't want, the dogs to bark and startle you because it'll make me seize up or things like that. And I'm like, there's going to be stuff. You will scare me. I will scream like a little girl and I might seize up for a few minutes. It's okay. It happens. We'll go on. It'll be fine. And the way we react to things differently, because I'm on the autism spectrum, a lot of things that she gets very emotional about, I don't care. It's irrelevant to me. And other things that really, really bother me, like, not having the right knife in the knife drawer for me to make my sandwich with, it's completely irrelevant to her. And, we're learning to meld these two ways of looking at it, and I'm having to try and understand and be compassionate. Like, she had a job where somebody didn't like her at the job, and it was very emotional for her, and she ended up leaving and getting another job. That was a foreign concept to me, and I'm trying to be as compassionate as I can. But I'm used to people not liking me, and I'm used to people not understanding me, and not knowing why I don't understand them and they don't understand me. I just go about my business and do my thing. So to me, it was a non-issue. To her, she's a very emotional, empathic person. This was a very big deal. And so, we're having to learn to try and meld those expectations and learn what each other needs.
Yeah, it's a challenging thing to try and get other people to understand or manage their expectations, for sure.
Yeah, I hear a lot of this sounds like the concept too of Mia Mingus' access intimacy, that somebody sort of knows you in some ways well enough to sort of know, like, okay, this is going to be essentially overwhelming for Jason, so maybe we should do this instead of that, or sort of knowing the person well enough where you don't feel like you always have to explain yourself or justify yourself in some ways, which is just something that we tend to do for people close to us in general. Sometimes, with disability, which we sometimes think of as like a biological, something wrong with somebody biologically, we tend to not like, oh, we just need to get over it or something. And, and some of this stuff with the expectation sounds a little bit like that access intimacy as well, of people sort of knowing and getting you and, working with your comedy. It's not always 100%. It never is.
And then this may open up a can of worms, but then there's the whole thing where politicians are out hoping to get elected and talking about how they care about this segment of people, disabled people, whatever, right? But then when you get down to it and you're calling some government department on the phone, the actual individual who works in that department doesn't actually care. And because your doctor, or because
Hello.
you have a disability that
Hello.
isn't exhibiting the
Hello.
way it should be, the doctor doesn't diagnose you properly, write it properly on the form. Therefore, the government doesn't think you're disabled, right? And how do you manage that expectation, or how do you deal with that?
Well, I try and educate people because I think what's amazed me is the high level, the lack of knowledge of the, let's say, the condition that I have, and I suppose it's the same for everyone, even up to the level of clinicians and neurologists and physiotherapists. I had a little story. I had a physiotherapist come round, and I gave her an hour's lesson on Parkinson's because she had no understanding of the subject, and that has surprised me. So it's not just sort of managing their expressions; it's blowing away the sort of myth of what it's about. Um, because unfortunately, I find that a lot of some of the clinicians that are out there are still 20 years behind the times. So, one of the recent stories I've heard is somebody going to their neurologist suffering with anxiety. Now, I'm sure nearly everybody on this page has had anxiety because of the condition. So, we all know that whatever we've got, that anxiety and loneliness and depression and all those sort of things cause us major issues from time to time and can cause issues on a daily basis. Her neurologist basically said, you don't get anxiety when you've got Parkinson's. Well, yeah, and wouldn't treat her. So, but this is, part of, I've got so, I have so many stories. I get so as frustrated with the professionals, not just the sort of amateurs like me, but the actual professionals themselves, whose knowledge is just extremely poor.
That's
Um,
why I didn't get diagnosed until I was 30. I was seeing a neurologist for like 10 years, and he was trying to figure out what this weird condition I had was that did all these weird things. He was really fascinated when he hit my reflex in my knee and my whole body went off. And so he wanted to figure out what this thing was. And went there for years. And eventually I'm crippled by it. I can't work, I can't walk, I can't see. And he kept telling me, well, it's not this, it's not that, it's not MS, it's not Huntington's, it's not all these things we can test for, it's not these things, and it's not Tourette's. And dude read a paragraph in med school, 20, 30 years ago, and that's all he knows about Tourette's. Like my last neurologist that I had, there were so many times he would come in and ask me something, and I would explain to him what's going on and explain to him, like, hey, this is a common thing with Tourette's, I'd explain it. He'd leave the room, he'd go Google it, and then he'd come back. He'd be like, you know what? I think you might be right on this. It does sound like this is something that's common with Tourette's, so I was like, it was ridiculous. They should know more if you're going to be in this field.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the ways that medical or any professions don't really talk about disability because disability is thought of as individualized and not a community of people, which is one of the things. It's also a lot of it's based on the medical model of disability, which is that you treat it like a disease. There's things that you do, and you try to treat it and fix it or overcome it. And generally, for politicians, I don't think people even know how big the voting block is for people with disabilities or how much that vote actually matters, because I think politicians are usually talking around people with disabilities because they see that as sort of the competence, because we have these competence things around disability as well, of how we think there's this whole huge history that would be like, that goes into this. But for physicians, the training is usually in a diagnostic box. You're seeing some pictures or videos, and you tend to see somebody is all the same. Like, these are how you go with it through the DSM. And while that it sort of sees it as one size fits all instead of the diversity even within the disability community, I think that a lot of times the place that I think a lot of people who get into some of the disability movements are is from other people with disabilities. And a lot of times the research or the backing or even the politicians aren't talking to those groups. So the data sets they get are inaccurate. I mean, it's just bad research anyways, or like, if you're working with a group of people or things, but then I think there's just so many times to where the training and stuff is so based on what everybody else, without who are not in that group are saying about a group of people, and that tends to lead to bad ways of working with people when you are talking about a group without actually including those people within the group to do it. You tend to get flawed information or flawed solutions or flawed or
A whole lot of assumptions.
what? Sorry.
I was just saying there's a whole lot of assumptions made, and there's a whole lot of like broad strokes and, oh, disabilities. That's paralyzed people, blind people, deaf people. Okay, we got it. Well, yes, those are disabilities, but there's a whole lot of other disabilities. Like, I have legit been yelled at by people and called a fake and a scammer because, like, I would get out of my wheelchair when I got to my car and walk it up the ramp on the back of my car and walk and get in the car. Like, you're a liar. You're a scammer. You're trying to rip people off. I'm like, how am I ripping people off going to Walmart to get groceries? It's not like I'm sitting out on the freeway with a sign and I have no legs. Give me money. Like, I'm just buying my groceries, ladies. But they don't understand that not everybody in a wheelchair is paralyzed. And not everybody, that needs a handicapped parking spot is paralyzed or 90 years old. There's a whole lot of us with a whole lot of disabilities. Even if I'm walking on my cane, I'm still really prone to falling down. Having a shorter distance to walk through that parking lot means a whole lot less chance that I'm going to get seriously injured. And that's in everybody's best interest.
Well,
You know what
sorry.
a lot of people, a lot of people here would benefit from is a service dog.
Mm-hmm.
So my service dog just recently passed away.
Oh.
And so I'm on the list to get a new one, and hopefully it's soon. I'm definitely praying for that, and so I'm just so excited. But because I find that a lot of people with the invisible disabilities, they are the ones that need it the most, in my opinion, because we get judged and looked down upon in so many ways. But if we have that service dog, not to prove ourselves, but just to go through life a little more easier, because half the battle that we face is mental. And having a service dog or a emotional support dog would be something that really helps people out.
Oh, yeah. Just this thing right here has gone so far to legitimize the fact that, there's something wrong with him. Because I wouldn't walk around carrying this thing everywhere I go if there wasn't actually a legitimate reason for it. So even when I'm not like super obviously ticky and I'm not screaming stuff out, it's like this quiet reminder, like, oh, something is wrong with this dude. So maybe I'm not going to harass him for parking in a handicap spot. But like, I have legit had people, like sneer and fuss at me saying maybe if I got out of that wheelchair and walked around, I wouldn't be so fat and I wouldn't need the wheelchair. And I'm like, excuse me, I am not in a wheelchair because I'm this fat. I'm this fat because I need a wheelchair to get around. I wasn't this fat before my Tourette's got so severe. I mean, I was always, pleasantly plump, but I did not get as big as I am until it got really hard to walk around. And it's a side effect of my condition, not the reason that my condition is so bad.
Well, that's one of the big assumptions that people tend to make assumptions that like disability is all the same or one and the same, and that it's linked to unhealthiness. And oh, you must be there's sort of that bias of oh, you must because you have a disability, you are inherently unhealthy in some ways. I think that fraud narrative is a big thing you see in television. How many television shows have you seen where somebody's faking a disability for some weird benefit? Now, the thing that people don't talk about is all the stigma that comes with having a disability. And so that internalized ableism, like you see so many shows narratives where people are doing something to do something, which like fraud cases, like with any of that stuff's like 1%. It barely ever happens in the time that most, but then people have these things, and I think it's one of the weirdest things that like you have to always re-up that you are still disabled with chronic conditions or like blindness or other things. Or I mean, you have to get a functional assessment with like IDD to go in the DD system in my state to be able to say like, look, I can't survive, so I need some support. You're basically putting you're putting it that you are like you have to sort of say like I'm less than this to be able to be accepted, and if you do anything more out of the expectations, you're told that you're a fraud, or oh well, you're not disabled enough, or we have to, you know,
It's funny you should say that because in the United Kingdom, to get help, you have to go for assessment. So they don't do the assessment in our local town. They do it 20, 30 miles away from where I live. So that means I have to get a train in, and then I have to walk from the station, or I have to grab my carer, one of my family, to push me. And then they always say to me, "Why are you here 2 hours early?" And always say to them, "I'm here 2 hours early because it's taken me 3 hours to get from the station to here, and I have to make sure I get there." And then the other classic question is, "How's the Parkinson's? Is it getting better?" And I'm like, "Save, pray to the Lord, I can't believe this. Is it getting better?" Actually, no, it's not. And will it get better? No. And and I always say to them, "Why can't we hold your assessment with loads of other Parkinson's people in my local town?" And the answer is, not allowed to do it. Part of the contract with the government, we have to do it from this building. So another little thing that frustrates me in life. Lack of common sense.
Is some of that because they're worried about fraud, that like you might know somebody and they might just like, because there's such a big thing of like somebody's gonna fudge the forms, or like you have to like
it is so hard to get disability in America, and like you have to be willing to go without working for years usually before you're ever going to get disability. Like, it's not fun, and it's not like you're getting some kind of windfall and like, woohoo, now I don't have to work. Like, most places don't make enough money to pay your rent and buy groceries. So like, it's not some amazing thing that I'm willing to do all this for just to get a measly little amount of money to try and survive on. And the other thing that frustrates me is the weird ableism with people where they think one thing equates to another. And like, well, I saw a blind guy that climbed a mountain, so obviously you could work 40 hours a week. And I'm like, man, if I could stand 40 hours a week, you better believe I would love to be working someplace. I would much rather be working someplace out of the house and, chit-chatting with people around the water cooler about what they did over the weekend than sitting in my recliner for 16 hours a day. But
unfortunately, a lot of people do live in poverty when they have disability.
Absolutely.
The two go hand in hand, and that compounds their problems, because then they can't get some of the resources and some of the services that they need easily. And that, when you were talking about politicians and government and so on, that's where they don't understand. But the amounts that these people get of financial support do not enable them to lead any quality of life, and so that just compounds their problems and just makes everything worse.
Well, I mean, you can only get $2,000 on Medicaid unless you have like an ABLE account, and even then, it's only like $13,000 depending on the state that you're in. Like, we really disincentivize people with disabilities to work and stuff. But some services you can only get through Medicaid, or you can only get through your Department of Developmental Disability. Like, I had to go through the front door in New York when I lived in New York, just because nobody else in the area, because I was outside the city, like in Syracuse, and nobody would accept any services unless I had a waiver, which meant I had to go into this whole process of trying to say, oh, I've had a disability since I was this age, and I need this sort of support, and I can't make more than this much money. Like, I couldn't even buy into Medicaid because I had too much money, because I saved up some stuff, and I've been lucky to be able to have some things and stuff. But it's like, I've never heard of something that you can't buy into in some ways, other than like this sort of system. And it's a really, I mean, each state does it itself in its own ways, just because of the because it's not centralized, which has its positives and negatives in some ways. But it is really interesting, sort of how some of that works, and there's a lot of gatekeeping of what is.
Yeah, a lot of red tape. It doesn't make sense at all.
Oh yeah, and I know a lot of people that can't get married because if they get married, they're going to lose all the services that they need to survive. You know, like some of them need nurses that come in and help take care of them. And if they get married like they wanted to years ago, then they're going to lose all those benefits, and then they don't have home health care anymore. And
Yeah, because they're afraid because they would then the finances they have would be shared, and they would have too much.
oh yeah,
We want to talk about managing expectations. What about the politicians and the big corporations that, did they not expect us to deal with this kind of issues? Why aren't those things already in place? Why are we having to have this discussion?
because the people making those decisions don't have to deal with these issues. If we all had the same health care, I guarantee you we would have wonderful health care. I would have been able to get this broken tooth in my mouth fixed years ago instead of Medicaid only being willing to pull it. And, but if the senators had the same insurance that I have, it would cover a whole lot more, I guarantee you.
Well, here's an example of where the government's heads at. I mean, the government of Canada, anyways. So, like, for someone on disability, they get $1,200 a month, right? Average. Whereas, people without disabilities that were out of work because of COVID were getting like $2,000 a month, right? Which shows you, says right there, we put the value of people without disabilities, we value them $800 more than people with disabilities.
Well, and I'll say that Canada is one of the interesting countries too, because has a very like refugees and oriented policy of letting people in the border. The one group that it won't allow unless you can verify is people with disabilities who would go towards the state system. So if you're a refugee with disability, and that's like in Canada, I mean, every country doesn't allow, is really, really suspicious of multiple refugees and always including people with disabilities. But Canada being the one that is the most open to it still has people with disabilities who would be a drain on the state system or need like government support as one of the only groups that it does not like allow sort of like refugee status or like immigrant status, or which is really interesting. Again, how it says about how we think about certain groups of people, even the most liberal of sort of societies, dependently on how you define it.
Right.
Sorry, that sounds like.
I think we need to get a little bit back on track here. In terms of, honestly, if we want to talk about government and all this stuff, we can go on for this. Yeah. So we can maybe do that another time. But the next question we wanted to talk about is, as individuals, Do we want to go back to? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, as individuals, how do you maintain realistic expectations for what you can do and what you can't do?
For me, that comes with being honest with the people closest to me and clearly describing what's going on and like what I need, and not assuming that they know or that they can figure it out or that, you know, they can guess, you know, because I could be feeling really bad while I'm sitting in my chair and look perfectly fine while I'm scrolling my phone or watching TV, and I'm being distracted and the dopamine receptors are, you know, firing as I'm scrolling Facebook or whatever, and I look fine. And then when you say like, "Hey, can you go get the laundry out of the dryer?" and I stand up and I'm herking and jerking all over the place, you know, it's easy for somebody else to look at that and be like, "You just don't want to get the laundry. That's what it is." And you know, it's absolutely not what it is. I've been feeling like crap all day. You just can't see that I'm feeling like crap. So, you know, trying to find that balance between like letting my wife know how I'm doing, but also not feeling like I'm complaining or saying so much that she's going to say, "Oh, well, we shouldn't do XYZ because he feels bad," or whatever. Like being honest about how I feel, but also being honest with you, like, yeah, I think I can handle that, or no, you know, I want to go. Like I would love to go to the last time our son was playing in the band at the football game, but I was like, the ride there, sitting in those hard metal stands for an hour and a half, and then the ride home, that's going to be a mess. And that's going to make your life a whole lot harder trying to help me get into bed. I'm just going to stay here. I miss it. I wish I could be there, but it's going to make it easier on all of us if I don't go today. And, you know, you got to be honest about that.
Sometimes saying no is a gift of love to the people we love.
I think also being honest with yourself in some ways. I think some, like everybody, we say, "Oh, well, this is what I want," because, you know, is it something that you want, or is it because you think that's what you should be doing? I think, you know, being honest when I'm getting overwhelmed, or when it's something, or like I can do this later, or maybe this is where I want to focus, or maybe I can focus on this a little, like I can do this just well enough, and be able to sort of, you know, it's really about being able to sort of know what I want and what I'm trying to do, and that, you know, I might not do it in the same ways that everybody else does, or I might take my own pace or something, but sort of being okay that I'm the one who can make these choices, and it's okay to do it my own way. I mean, it's good to communicate with other people, but really it's my choice and how I want to do it, what I prioritize, what timeline I'm sort of thinking, and you know, that I can live it my own way, even if somebody else is like, "Why are you doing that way?" or like, "This is what you're supposed to do as an adult." Well, maybe I want to do my own thing. Maybe there's a way that makes better for me. So
I like it this way. This way it's easy. This way works.
yeah.
Yeah, but what I've found is I've learned by my mistakes, where I thought, "Oh, I used to be able to do that. I'll be able to do it, but it'd be a struggle." And then realizing for days afterwards, I'm absolutely, well, completely gone, if you want to put it like that.
Yeah.
Fatigue takes completely over, and I'm sort of spaced out, and you know, and so I've learned that I've had to take it easy. So when I go up to the hospital in London, instead of trying to go up on a train, do all the hospital, then be poked about in the hospital, come all the way back, it's no good. So I always now stay up in a hotel with my wife. So we're just round the corner and make life easy. Yeah, it is. And you think to yourself, you know, you've got to do it, because otherwise, by the time I'd got to see my sort of doctor, I was like on the floor. He'd say, "How are you getting on?" And I'd be like, "I haven't got a clue, you know, I'm absolutely smashed because I've used all my energy just to walk through your door."
Mm-hmm.
So,
One
no,
way that I'm sorry, go ahead.
now what I was going to say, and what we found very useful, is to stay in the same hotel. because they now know, like I said earlier, who I am. They've now seen me struggle to walk from the restaurant back to the bedroom. Yeah. And they've seen me turn up in a taxi and having a job getting out of the taxi. So that's always, so we immediately book into the same place, same sort of familiarities, and now they know me by my first name. So,
Mhm.
which is great.
Wow.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Anne. Wanted to add something?
It's flown right out of my head. It'll come back.
I know for me too, it's finding routines that work and finding what works. Like it took me like 2 hours to set up a toothbrush alarm to make sure it was going to the right speaker and that it was gonna like what happens if I don't do it right away, like if I'm out and stuff or something, or like then I could set it to a routine where it plays music so that it's easier to focus for the 2 minutes than trying to like, being able to take that time and experiment, even though my dad who was helping me was like, just do it, just it doesn't matter. I'm like, no, I need this to work for my routine.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I need to be this to be something that I can do all the time. Like I have reminders set to go off all the time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say her name because the device will go off if I do. But I have her set with reminders all day long, and like
Mhm.
stuff to like post to social media so that I can advertise. And I don't hit all of them, but I'll hit one or two of them.
Yeah.
And like reminding me to take my meds, reminding me to eat lunch, because I'll get so hyper focused on my work that I'll look up and like, oh, it's 10:30 at night. We need to go to bed. And I didn't eat lunch or dinner, or I'm still drinking my coffee from that morning and, didn't even realize. So, like, I've got to set myself alarms because I know eating regularly makes my Tourette's better and, stuff like that, getting regular sleep. So, I've got to, do those things.
I just remembered what I was going to say. One way that I have been able to communicate to people who don't have a chronic disease about the amount of energy that it takes me to get through a day is I talk about how it's like I'm an app that chews up energy, like some of those apps that you can get on your phone to help you navigate. If you don't have it plugged in, your phone's going to run out of juice really quickly because it just takes a lot of energy for that particular app to run. Other things can run in the background all the time and it's no big deal and it doesn't chew up much energy. That is, for me, a good analogy for what it's like for neurotypical people to function. I'm more like a GPS type of app. I chew through my energy a lot faster than some people do. But what that means on a practical level is that I have to be very clear about what my priorities are and very honest with myself about when I'm getting close to the end of my energy. Because if I don't do that, then not so good things happen. I get grumpy. When I don't feel grumpy, it's like the energy has to get past my vocal cords that are feeling all scrunched up. And so it comes out like a growl. And I don't want that. And I'm trying to avoid it. But it's hard to regulate it if I get exhausted. And the anxiety is another issue. I remember one time we were running late for grabbing a plane, and I was going through security, and they must have thought I was a terrorist. They pulled me aside. Well, it's because I was tremoring, and it didn't even occur to me that that might be an issue. And they checked this and they checked that, and they didn't find any explosive devices on me or anything like that. No, not exactly. And then I said, I have Parkinson's and I do tremor. Is that what's going on here? And they went, oh, well, why didn't you tell us? So, I find that the more I can just be matter of fact and open about the Parkinson's, the less it's able to control my life. So I'm just as matter of fact about it as if I had a broken leg, and that would impact how quickly I can get from one place to another, or how tired I would get by the end of the day.
Gavin, do you have anything to add about maintaining realistic expectations of yourself?
Yeah, I've stopped having so many expectations. So I wish I'd done it a long time ago, but most of my expectations are not under my control entirely. So they have some outside influence anyway. I can do what I can do, and then if everything falls in place, maybe it meets expectations. And it seems like the root of most of my unhappiness in life has been falling short of what I thought expectations should be. So one way to solve that is to minimize my expectations of anything. And that doesn't mean I don't want to do well or don't strive to do better. It means I'm still going to do those things, but I just don't have this preconceived notion of what the result will look like.
And be realistic about it. One of the things that I have found important for me, and it might be helpful for somebody, I don't know, is being honest with myself sometimes when I'm putting these expectations on myself, and really looking at why am I putting this expectation? Why am I putting this pressure on myself? Am I trying to do as good as the neurotypical dude next to me? Am I trying to outdo and prove that I'm not disabled? Am I trying to, not make my wife worry, so I'm overdoing it today to prove to her that she doesn't need to worry about this, but then I'm going to be ticking so bad later, she's going to be worried about me. And being honest with myself about why I'm pushing myself for some of these things has really helped me take a step back and do things, like Richard said earlier, I go to a lot of comic book conventions. If it's far enough away, I will book an extra day at the hotel, and I will just lay up and relax that day after, let the swelling in my feet, my back go down, and, not jump in a car and try and drive 16 hours home the next day right away. I will take time and rest and make that trip easier. I broke one trip up into 2 days on the way home just because it's going to be a whole lot easier on my nervous system if I just make this 2 8-hour drives and chill out at the hotel and watch TV than try and make 16 hours out of it in one go.
And I think you're right.
I like to do, which is put myself in the best situation, and I know how to. You can't control everything, and you can't, but I sort of know, okay, I tend to get anxiety, or I tend to work better with some structure, or I tend to do so. Putting myself so where I'm mitigating the things that are harder for me, and putting myself in the areas where I'm better at, or situations that work better, whether it's planning or what I'm good at, and sort of being okay, that's not my area, or I might only be able to do so much. If I know I'm anxious, getting to the airport really early because I tend to get really anxious, and it's easier to wait and watch television than to be nervous that I'm going to make the flight because I tend to freak out, or knowing that okay, I tend to work the best in this environment, so how can I build my work or my life around what works best for me, or what my goal, what I want to be able to do. Socializing, I know I tend to not do well with small talk or open-ended things, so how do I find activities that I like, that I happen to be around people with, because I tend to do better then, because I'm more engaged and interested, and it's sort of somewhat less ambiguous.
Another autistic friend of mine brings games to all the parties that we go to. Yes. And he always gets a group of people around him wanting to play the game that he brought. And it's so much fun. And, it's a great strategy. I like to get everywhere early, because if I don't, I'm going to be stressing out the whole way there. And then I'm going to be ticking more. And then I'm worried, is my eyes going to go out on the road? And then I'm really stressed out. Nah, I'll get there early.
Well, I was going to put a sort of bit of an opposite spin on what you said. So when we travel and we go to the airport, I have to get everything really organised months in advance. Everything has to be done. So
Yep.
last night I struggled to print off some boarding passes. So that stressed me out because nothing worked except one of the browsers and it wouldn't print off. But then when we get to the airport, I'm super laid back because I've got it all organised. And my wife takes over the anxiety. Yeah, because like our loved ones, they worry about us. Yeah. And
Mhm.
I'm sitting possibly in a wheelchair thinking, I've got all the assistance, I've got someone to collect me, take me through customs and whatever. And my wife always says to me, I'm completely stressed until I've got you strapped in the plane and I know I can't lose you. And I sit there and think, that's, really odd because I can't see how I can move that quick to get lost. But so I have to behave.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've done it.
And but that is because she worries until literally I'm on the plane, there's a seatbelt around me, and I can't get out the seat for the next 4 hours, and that's it. You know, so it just shows you, how it affects other people, and because she worries about me, I worry about her. Yeah, it's like isn't it like you were saying earlier? It's like a circle, and it gets
Mhm.
worse and worse and worse. And the more I see her get tense, I get tense. Yeah, and I'm thinking to
Mhm.
myself, but it's all organised. And then there only has to be one little upset, like the assistance arrives 5 minutes later than you expect, and by the time they've arrived, your tension and your stress levels have risen up to a very high level. Um, but that's because your carers and things worry about you because they take on a lot of the responsibility, you know.
They
And
do.
I think sometimes people forget how important the carers are in all of this. You know, your sort of your loved ones and whatever. You know? So
Um,
so that was a different
so
sort of spin on that.
one last question, I guess, before we go. Um, you know, how is self acceptance or um, you know, sort of accepting yourself, how is it related to your ability to manage expectations? Like, if you don't want to admit that you have a disability or have a weakness, how ready are you to um, set realistic expectations going forward?
Well, I personally think it's unless you've accepted it, it's extremely difficult to move on in a positive way because otherwise I think you're staying in that area of diagnosis and trying to sort of hide the fact that you are disabled.
Try and figure
Um,
out a way to
so
fix it.
yeah, so for me, what I found was very motivational was finding a very motivational group of Parkinson's people on YouTube all singing a song. And I thought, and I can remember saying to my wife, right, we've got to move on from the diagnosis. And these are the people I want to be around. And that was how I started the Rickety Warrior thing, was to get out into these people who all had strange names and were out on YouTube and things, because they were the positive people that allowed me to manage my expectation, but move forward in a positive line. Because otherwise, I think I would have stayed in that initial diagnosis period for a long time and wasted part of my life, thinking, oh, I've got Parkinson's, poor old me, how unlucky, and all the rest of it. Where I very quickly moved on from that because I thought, I've got to get on with it. I've got it and I've got
Mhm.
to get on with life, and I love life, and I do.
It's like you said earlier, like some of the most angry comments I've gotten have been from other people in the Tourette's community, and like this is at a time when I'm spending all day often in bed or my wheelchair, with one eye and one thumb working my phone so I can talk with people around the world trying to encourage people. And they get mad at me like, well, you don't know what my life's like. You don't know how hard I have it. I blink all day long. And I'm like, dude, you can freaking see, man. You can do anything you want to. Like, be happy, man. No, I blink and I swear sometimes and I do this and I do that. dude, you can feed yourself. I couldn't get off the toilet by myself earlier today. Like,
Mm.
enjoy what you got, man. And they get mad at me that I had a positive attitude. And, and then they'd find out how my life was and they'd get even madder at me. Like, why aren't you as miserable as me? And, it took a little bit for me to accept the fact that I was never going to get back to the way I was, and that I wasn't going to be able to be the 20-year-old fishy that could do anything and could build anything and rode his bike 10 miles a day and went kayaking and all that stuff. I nearly drowned myself last time I tried to kayak. That's not on the table for my shaky butt anymore. And I really miss it. Like, I built my own boat. Like, I loved being on the water and I dearly miss it. But I could spend all day pining and moaning about the things that I can't do. And, it's not safe to run a table saw anymore. And it's not, I can't kayak and I can't ride my bike and blah, blah, blah. But I'm still an awesome dad. I'm still an awesome friend. I'm a great husband. I, love to go online and talk with people and, give motivational speeches and stuff. I make comic books for a living. I have a lot of things to offer this world. I'm super creative. I'm a writer, all kinds of stuff. Like, I would much rather focus on those things, but it's a choice. You decide what you're looking for in this life. And if a friend of mine told me a story years ago, and it's just always stuck with me, about a buzzard and a hummingbird. And if you release them over the same patch of the woods, one of them is looking for death and decay, and the other is looking for life and rebirth. And they're both going to find exactly what they're looking for. I'm not going to sit here looking for all the reasons my life sucks. There's plenty of those. I'm going to look for all the things that make it amazing. And sometimes that list is narrow, but I can always find something. And that keeps me so much more positive and has made my life so much better. And I can expect so much bigger things out of myself than I dreamed I could at the beginning, because I've learned how to work around some things and, some cheats and things that make things easier. Yeah, I cannot trust myself with an open bottle of ink and a brush and a white sheet of paper anymore. That's a bad idea. But I work digitally now, and if I mess up, I can click undo 1,000,000 times. And it has sped up my work so much faster than it already was. And man, my life is so good. I can't waste my time focusing on those things that are negative.
I think we have to
Yeah.
guard ourselves against defining a good life as being one that is simply an extension of the life we've known. Because and this is something that is common to all of us. I remember reading a book about midlife and how midlife is a process of letting go of the truths that got us through the first half of life so that we can embrace the truths we're meant to learn for the second half of our lives. So that's the common experience. We just have a few physical things going on in addition. But even if we didn't, we'd be learning new truths. And I'm discovering that if I have that attitude of thankfulness, then things like the fact that I can't trust myself to drive at night means that I'm going to spend more time with my very wonderful husband, and we're probably going to have dinner out and not just, me run out, run an errand, come back. So there are joys in this time of life and in this situation that I would not be experiencing otherwise. And I'm thankful for them. I'm living a much richer life than I would have had I not had Parkinson's. And the people in my life are extraordinary and joyful.
I've got so many wonderful friends.
I think it's that you can't fight yourself in some ways, or you can't find, contentment through fighting yourself and, or who you are, or trying to be somebody you're not, or somebody who you thought you were or used to be in some ways. I think for me, it's, also not always just trying to be positive, or I could be more positive, because I think we can sometimes get in that trap. Like, it's okay to be upset sometimes, or it's okay to feel down. I mean, you can't live in that. Like, you can't live being happy 100% of the time, but, sort of being okay that there's times where you're going to be frustrated or upset. And that's part of being alive too. Just trying to make myself feel positive also isn't going to make me feel positive, but recognizing when I do feel good or when I notice some of those things too, that's important as well. And just sort of, trying to accept who I am and what I'm feeling, and that, that I have other people, but things are also going to change. And part of life, which is tough, is also deteriorating in some ways,
Mhm.
whether mentally or physically, or probably both at some point. And, that it's going to be hard to accept all the time, or, that there's going to be 100% acceptance, but trying to work through my emotions rather than ignoring them
Mhm.
or trying to live too much in it.
Oh yeah, you've got to let yourself weep. You got to let yourself be sort of like I had to let myself mourn all the things that I wasn't going to be able to do. All these things that were just always truths that were going to happen. I was going to build my house. I was going to go kayaking in Kauai. All these things that I just knew I was going to do, and now I realized I can't do those things, and I had to let go of them, and that was really sad. And I had to let myself mourn that, but I also had to choose not to wallow in it, and there's a big difference. And I've been really blessed since to be able to be friends and be alongside other men, particularly as they've gone through things that have disabled them, and I've been able to be there with them and be like, it's okay, you are going to cry over this, and you need to feel the loss of these things. But just because you can't work all day anymore and be the one paying most of the bills doesn't mean that you can't get to the point that you can drive again and then pick up your kids from school and be there for them after school and help them with their homework and find all these kinds of things that they could take joy in their new life. And it's been a real blessing to get to be there and help in that. And I'm real grateful for that opportunity.
I would say one other thing is also being able to find communities, and whether that's the disability community or your specific disabilities community, but also interest communities or things that you like. I mean, having communities is really important. I mean, everybody defines what that means or what it looks like for themselves. There's no one way to social, even though sometimes we talk about it, but being able to feel like you have what works for you in some ways, in a way, I think is important. So, because it's nice to know that, you affect things and that people care about you and you care about people in some ways as
I
well.
know you're not alone out there.
Yeah, I think one of the sort of funny stories was when I was first diagnosed, and it led me actually to become into more support groups in the United States and Canada than over in the UK. And I joined a support group online, and it was so negative. I look back now and I said the most awful comment to my wife. I said, on this group, I said, everybody's ill. Because I said, all they do every day is moan that they're not feeling good. And I said, I can't take it anymore. Because I said, I'm just going to end up the one who's going to be depressed. Because
Mm,
I feel not too good every day. I've got little things that don't make me feel too good. I have really bad days, good days. But I don't go online and keep saying I'm ill. And I had to come off of it. And I joined a group in America that was extremely positive, completely the opposite, that taught me a lot. But I look back and saying the statement, they all think they're all ill the whole time, and because they literally there wasn't anybody on there who hadn't got a positive spin on life. They all seem to breed negativity, which
mm, mm.
which I look back at now 4 years down the line and think, God, how awful. But that was my comment at the time was, and something I wouldn't say now, but you know, but it just shows you've got to choose the right group for you that's got that positive
Yeah.
spin to, like we've said, because we've all cried over our condition. I've cried a lot in time. Certain people trigger things off in me, during my Parkinson's, and they say something like when I left work and my boss said something to me, and that was it. I was off. I couldn't stop myself crying because he'd said something, and I'd been really strong at work for months and months and months, trying to cope with it. And I thought, I'm not going to show any weakness. You know, I worked with a really good group of guys, and out of their kindness, I knew they'd take the mickey out of me because they say, "Come on, Richard, pull yourself together, get moving," you know. And it was all meant, you know, it was a sign of affection, and I'm very good friends with them. But the moment he said to me, "Here's the present we've all got you," and there was a lovely card, that was it. I'd gone. And I've had a few moments in my time. But yeah, positivity has got to be the key around this and support.
Yesterday, I posted a club called Mitigation Builds Community. And also to say to the community, a lot of times we hold each other accountable and remind each other what the realistic expectations for ourselves are.
It's like someone's dog or
For God.
Gavin, is that your dog?
No,
Maybe.
not mine.
It's probably my dog panting. I thought I had myself muted, but she's
Um,
scared of the storm coming.
Oh,
yeah.
well, I've had my cat going back and forth, so.
She made it through a tornado when she was a pup, and we found her. A friend found her in the wreckage afterwards, and she cannot handle storms. She can't handle the UPS man driving by. She thinks it's a storm and freaks out, and never knows what to do. Usually tears stuff up. So she's at my feet right now, panicking.
We all have our issues.
Yeah. Further to Jason's point, I think self-acceptance, which leads to managing expectations for yourself, but self-acceptance has a lot to do with living life. We've been burdened by other people's expectations of what we should do and what we shouldn't do, and the world's expectations, and that sort of we take that on ourselves, and accepting ourselves has a lot to do with letting go of all that baggage and just dumping it out the window.
Yeah, I mean, oh, sorry, you were gonna say something.
No, go ahead, Jason.
You know, I mean, I think it's one of those things that we live in an ableist world where we don't really talk about that the world has this ableism in it because it's seen as, you know, just, oh, well, that's a biological imperative or something. So being able to learn to sort of take away, you know, realize that internalized ableism that we all have in some ways, and that we, you know, sometimes it just feels like, oh, you're pushing yourself or you're trying to be better, or, you know, being able to realize that and being able to stop some of those narratives in some ways, or try to redirect some of those narratives is really, really important.
Yeah.
I think that what young people go through in terms of coping with these issues is huge and terribly hard. I didn't have Parkinson's when I was young, but just being young and trying to figure out how to be someone who felt different from everybody else in this world, it was really tough for me. And so I just want to say to you young people, you're doing better than you know. And although the situations can get tougher, I find that I'm getting tougher too, because I'm discovering there's so much in life that doesn't matter after all.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just let it go. There are a few things that matter, and you'll be given the courage and the hope and the stamina to deal with those things bravely and well. You're already doing those things bravely and well. So, you know, as a 65-year-old, I'm thinking I would rather be 65 and have Parkinson's than be 20 and be in perfect health, because 20 was hard work.
Mm-hmm.
65 is,
I love being an old man. Oh, It
Yeah.
is so freeing. I can wear what I want. I can do what I want. And I just don't care what anybody else says. I mean, I walk out in the front yard in my PJs all the time because my pajama pants are my work clothes because it's way easier on my sensory issues. And I don't give a flip anymore. Like, if I was a kid, ain't no way. I don't care. I'm comfortable. I'll answer the door that way. I'm fine. I will do interviews in my PJ pants, and I will tell you I'm wearing them if I want. I ain't hung up about it. It's amazingly freeing.
It
great.
is. And one of the nice things about having Parkinson's is that it gives me something in common with most people, it seems. My friends who have Alzheimer's, I can say, well, I don't have Alzheimer's, but I do have Parkinson's. And, I'm struggling with some cognitive issues and blah, 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 So it makes them feel safer dealing with whatever it is they're dealing with, and maybe makes them feel less awkward or ashamed, or like, it's something that distances them from other people. I feel like my Parkinson's lots of times is the log that falls down across the creek so you can get from one side to the other. And, other people are over there and they think that there's something that isolates them. But no, my Parkinson's is something that, I'm clumsy. I have poor stamina sometimes. I deal with anxiety. Those are just part of the human condition too. And so, I can reach out to somebody who's hurting in that kind of way, or who feels weird because they just had an anxiety attack, and I can go, me too. I have those all the time.
One of the best groups I was ever in was when I was still trying to get diagnosed and we didn't know exactly what was going on. And a friend at church invited me to her chronic illness support group. And there's people there with MS and lupus and Parkinson's, and one lady's missing a leg from diabetes, and we just all had so much more in common than we did separating us. Yep. And worrying about, are we doing a good enough job with our kids with the limitations that we have? Like, I was so afraid that because my kids weren't going to see me working 100 hours a week because I was in a wheelchair, that they weren't going to get a work ethic from me. And man, my boys are out there killing it. They make me so proud. They're such hard workers. And, I know they got that from me, even though they couldn't physically see me doing it, but they saw me never giving up. They saw me doing the things that I could do.
Perseverance.
And yeah, we gained so much from it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. That's great note to end on. It's just about 2 hours, and I know some of you probably have medications that are wearing off, or we all need to take a break and whatever. So it was definitely great speaking with everyone today and getting to hear everyone's opinions and talk about this topic that we think is important to everyone. Yeah.
We need to go and take care of other things.
Yeah, for sure. But it was great seeing everyone, and we will see you soon, I hope.
Thank you all so much for your input.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. It was
It's been
delightful.
really enjoyable.
Y'all are awesome.
I'm going to bed. Yeah, I'm going to bed now.
I'm getting on my pajama pants.
I've got the hospital tomorrow. For blood tests at 9.
Okay. Bye.
Oh my.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.